just with fasting is, oh sorry, I'm moving.
Very good.
Is what is fasting? So we're going to go with what is fasting. We're going to talk about what is fasting, why to fast, and how to fast. So, question: what is fasting? Who wants to go ahead and answer? Shannon, do you want to answer?
Refraining from something.
Okay, yeah. So it's typically, we're looking at a couple passages in the Bible. Fasting is just abstaining from food. Typically, in the New Testament, it can also mean from other things. In today's culture, it can be from you choosing to fast from TV, video games, anything that is kind of in the way of spending time with God. And we see in the, I'm mainly going to look at the Old Testament, what the Old Testament says about fasting, but it's typically for a specific period of time, or for a general period of time. Normally it's where I'm going to set fast for a certain number of days for a specific reason. We're going to look at some reasons. It's also typically associated with a period of mourning, or with a period of seeking the Lord in a way that goes above and beyond kind of what is normally seeking the Lord. So, a couple things fasting is not fasting is, we're talking about mainly about food because that's our primary example in the Old Testament and throughout the Bible. Fasting isn't just a diet. It's not just saying, I'm gonna stop eating because I need to lose a little weight. There's diets out there that are founded on fasting. You just cut out your calories and you lose some weight. But fasting is not something to be taken lightly. When we see it in the scriptures, it's never something that is meant to be taken lightly, meant to just be a joke or anything like that. It's something that's very serious. So we're going to look at our first passage of scripture is going to be Isaiah 58. If you guys want to turn there. We're going to look at kind of what Isaiah is talking about. And here, it may be titled in your Bible that this is either true versus false fasting, or correct fasting versus incorrect fasting. But I'm going to read the first half of this and then make a few points. So, Isaiah 58 starts with, "Cry aloud, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways." This is the Lord speaking. "As if they were a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the judgment of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near God." It says, "Why have we fasted and you see it not?" It's the people speaking. "Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no knowledge of it? Behold, in the day of your fast you seek your own pleasure and oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with a wicked fist. Fasting like yours this day will not make your voice to be heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day for a person to humble himself? Is it to bow down his head like a reed and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this a fast and a day acceptable to the Lord?" The first thing I want to point out about why we fast is what makes fasting true fasting. So in verse 3, it's talking about whose glory are we seeking. Here we go. "In the day of your fast, you seek your own pleasure." So the first thing about why we fast is we fast to see God's glory advanced. We fast to see the gospel made known to people. And he's pointing out here that this false fasting, which is what we just read about, the people of Israel fasting about things that weren't important, or they just weren't even fasting appropriately at all. And they were seeking their own pleasure. So even in denying themselves food, they were seeking their own good. They were seeking their good above the Lord's glory. And they weren't concerned with the Lord's purposes for them as a nation. We're going to look at another passage in Nehemiah, but basically, they weren't repentant of their sin. They weren't broken over how they were living their lives. It says it very clearly, they were seeking their own pleasure. They were oppressing their workers. Even in their fasting, they were quarreling and fighting. They were literally getting into fights and hitting each other, even while they were fasting. And the most important thing here is that fasting like yours this day, so the way that they were fasting says, will not make your voice to be heard on high. So kind of one of the main points about why we fast is to be heard of from the Lord, so that He would hear our voice when we cry out to Him. We're going to talk about how to fast, but part of fasting is prayer. And fasting is a way that the Lord helps us to humble ourselves so that we can be heard by God. So there's a kind of second point of why we fast is to humble ourselves. And that's kind of the next verse. It's such the fast that I choose a day for a person to humble himself. So it's a physical act to represent our spiritual state. So we physically fast from food in an attempt and in a way that we can represent to the Lord that we are humbling ourselves before Him. That God is worthy of everything. And we're going to abstain from food to represent that, to show that to the Lord. What this does is this shows God that we're willing to put the spiritual things above our physical things. So it's more important when we take a day to fast, it's more important to see the Lord, to have a better view of Him, to have fewer distractions. It's more important to do that than to be satisfied with food or with TV. Whatever it is that hinders your ability to see God and to commune with God. And then we also see, as we're going to look at the second section here that I've already said, but another reason we fast and why we fast is so that God's glory would be made known. We're going to see that primarily in Nehemiah in our second section here. But another reason, in Nehemiah in our second section, but another reason we fast is for others. So I'm going to read the second half of Isaiah 58, so 6 through 12. Is this not the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh? Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you, the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and He will say, Here I am. If you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and speaking wickedness, if you pour yourself out for the hungry and satisfy the desire of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness, and your gloom be as the noonday. And the Lord will guide you continually, and satisfy your desire in scorched places, and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water, whose waters do not fail. And your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. So a couple of sections I just wanted to point out. So he's talking about fasting. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and to bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover him and not to hide yourself from your own flesh. So what Isaiah is talking about here is we actually can use fasting strategically to be able to give that food to somebody who doesn't have food, to open our home for somebody who doesn't have a home. And basically by doing that, we're giving up our finances as well. We're saying, Lord, like my finances, what I want is less important than what you want for your people, for people around me. When you do it that way, it says in the next verse, then shall your light break forth like the dawn. So we see in Isaiah that our light, we're called to be a city on a hill, we're called to shine our light. The New Testament talks. And this, right here in Isaiah, is telling us that when we fast, when we lay things down for God's glory, for the gospel to be made known, our light shines forth. People can see the gospel in us. Our light physically gets seen in darkness where it wouldn't ordinarily be seen. Your righteousness shall go before you. People will see the righteousness, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. And then it says, then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. So appropriate fasting, fasting that puts God's glory first, enables us to hear from God in a way that we ordinarily would. And again, that's because we're laying something down for God. We're sacrificing something that we would ordinarily take for granted. There are a lot of people who don't get to eat every day. And by joining in that suffering, joining in Christ's suffering, this is more way we join in Christ's suffering, we get to proclaim the good news of the gospel to people. We get to show what the gospel looks like and laying down our lives for somebody else. And then the Lord uniquely speaks to us. I can go through a lot of biblical backing as far as why that happens, but you look all throughout the scriptures and the Lord uniquely speaks to his people when they sacrifice for him. It's just another way that he does that. So, that's kind of why to fast. The main point is we fast for God's glory. We fast for the gospel to be made known. And then how do we fast? So, we're going to look at Nehemiah chapter 1, some sections from that, and then Nehemiah 9. I'm going to read the entirety of Nehemiah 1, and then I'm going to just point out a couple sections from Nehemiah 9. Nehemiah is after Chronicles, right after Ezra, and it's before Job. If you don't know where that is, it's a couple of books before Job. But so this is Nehemiah 1. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. There's some names in here I don't know how to say. But now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province, who had survived the exile, is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem was broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. So, just want to point out real quickly that the wall of Jerusalem being broken down and its gates destroyed by fire is a representation that God did not let his people because they don't have victory. They're being defeated by their enemies. And then Nehemiah goes on to say, as soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name. And give success to your servant today, and grant your mercy in the sight of this man. So the first thing we see here is that how we fast with prayer. We see this in verse 4. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days and continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So it's important that while we fast, we are praying with God. So again, the point of fasting, the main reason we fast is so that God's glory will advance and the gospel will be made known. And we can't do that apart from help from God. So we fast with prayer. The second thing is we fast. This is it can be difficult to do, but it's very important. The second thing we do is we fast with confession. So he talks about, even I and my father's house have sinned. Before that, he says, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. So we looked at this section in Isaiah about people fasting for their own pleasure, for their own good, for their own glory. What happened is they weren't confessing their sin to God. They didn't understand that they were not in the right relationship with the Lord. Here Nehemiah is confessing, saying, Lord, I'm taking this time to mourn and to fast and to pray, because things are not right within Israel. Things are not right in our kingdom. Our walls are being torn down. Our gates are being destroyed. Our enemies are defeating us. And he's calling back and saying, Lord, like, you have claimed to be with your people. What's going on? You've shown us that when we repent of our sin, we have victory. Yet we don't have victory right now. What's going on? So he's confessing the fact that they are sinning, that's what's going on. They're unrepentant of their sin. The other 2 points I want to make about how we fast is from Nehemiah 9. I won't read all of it, I'll read just a few parts of it. And here the people of Israel have gathered together. It says, now on the 24th day of this month, the people of Israel were assembled with fasting and sackcloth and with earth on their heads. And the Israelites separated themselves from all foreigners and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers. And they stood up in their place and read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a quarter of the day. For another quarter of it, they made confession and worshiped the Lord their God. And then it talks about all the Levites that stood there. It said, stand up and bless the Lord your God from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. And then the rest of the chapter goes on to talk about who God is. They're confessing their sin, and they're proclaiming who God is. God, you are the Lord, you are the alone, you are in heaven. You saw the affliction of your fathers, and go through it and kind of give a brief history of what's happened. Yet they were disobedient, and they rebelled against you. The people of Israel casted God's law behind them. They didn't listen to the prophets, he goes on to say. Yet the Lord warned them in order that they would turn back, yet they didn't obey. So at the very end of Nehemiah, it says, because of all this, because of the history that we can read about how the people of Israel fell away from the Lord, how they stopped listening to God and stopped obeying the law, it says, because of all this, we make a firm covenant in writing. This covenant that they made was to proclaim God again, to say, Lord, I want to be in right communion with you. We've set aside time to mourn, time to read your word, time to pray, time to confess our sin. We're saying, Lord, I covenant to be with you again. I covenant to repent of my sin. I covenant to follow your word and your law. So we see in verse 1 here, Nehemiah 9. So how did they fast? They fasted with community. So the people of Israel were assembled with fasting and sackcloth. They fasted together. So Lord, as a community, as a people, we're going to fast together because we have sinned and we have fallen short of your glory. Yet we want to change, we want to repent, and need strength, and need power to do that. So that's why they fasted. They also fasted with the word. And I think this is primarily the most important thing we do when we fast, is we fast with the word and then we fast with prayer. So they stood up in their place and they read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a quarter of the day. So for 6 hours of the day, they stood up and they just read God's word. They reminded themselves of what God's word says, what it calls them to live like, how they're supposed to be a people and a nation that represents the Lord. It took 6 hours out of their day to do that. And then for the next 6 hours, or for another quarter, they made confession and worshiped their God. We talked about already, but we see again, they fasted with confession. And the point was that so God would be worshipped, that God would be glorified in their midst, and that God would be glorified outside of their midst as well. So to kind of recap all of that, why do we fast? We fast to humble ourselves before the Lord so that God's glory would be made known. We also fast so that the gospel would be made known as well. We fast for others, we don't fast for ourselves. And then how do we fast? We fast with the word, we fast with prayer, we fast with confession, we fast with community. So when we do those four things while we fast, we are fasting in a way that Isaiah will call appropriate and true fasting. A way that, he says, would make our light break forth like a dawn. That the righteousness of the Lord would go before us, the glory of the Lord would be behind us. And then when we fast like that, the Lord answers us. When we cry out to the Lord, He hears us. So there's going to be a real practical way to kind of apply. Fasting is to fast. Pretty simple. It's important to as I talked about what is fasting, it's important to have a specific reason we're fasting for. So we read Nehemiah. They were fasting for the oppression they were facing because they were unrepentant of their sin. So tomorrow we've got some people in the church that are going to be taking a day of fasting and prayer, just to pray for some things. I'd encourage you guys to, whether it be tomorrow or another day, talk to some people, get together with your spouse or your friends and say, this is something that's been burdening my heart. So for me, when I was in college, I spent a lot of time fasting for just foreign nations, just that the missions and the gospel of the Lord would be proclaimed across the globe. So that was something that was very specific for me. They said, Lord, I can fast, I can pray for this. I can confess that I don't spread the gospel the way I ought to. Yet I want God's glory to be made known where I can't even go. So I fasted about that. We look at Isaiah, we look at Nehemiah. They fasted for other people. So there's people in Lincolnton, there's people in our city that don't eat every day. There's people that don't have a home. And there are a ton of people who don't understand the gospel. That's something very important we can fast for. To say, Lord, I'm going to take a day, 2 or 3 or whatever, and I'm going to take half my day, and I'm going to say, Lord, I'm not going to eat. I'm going to spend time in prayer, reading your word, and I want your gospel to be made known to me. Another really good thing to fast for is for our government. We're in some interesting times now with our leadership and what the Lord's doing in our country, and how we're being led as a country. That's also something that we can fast for. So I encourage you guys to think through, like, what is something that's been bothering you? What's something that's been burdening you? Is there something that's getting in the way of your ability to relate with the Lord, to hear from God? And take a day or 2 or whatever. Just take a period of time. Say, Lord, I want to surrender this area of my life to you. I want to give up eating for the day. I want to give up TV for the day, whatever it may be that hinders you from the Lord. I want to give up that so I can see more of you, and so other people can see more of you as well. So like I said, there's some people doing that tomorrow that I know of that saying, Lord, I'm unsure of what to do about a particular thing, so I'm going to take a day, I'm going to fast about it, I'm going to seek the Lord and seek His will in the matter. I would encourage you guys to do that, whether it be tomorrow or a different day, but just to set aside some time and say, Lord, I'm surrendering this to you. I want you and your glory to be made known. So that's basically it. Do you guys have any questions or anything that was unclear you'd like me to clarify, or anything maybe didn't make sense? Luke, you can have the next
Thank you.
7.5 minutes.
Old bearded one. Our fearless bearded leader. All right, well, here's what, so I'm going to just give a kind of a plan of what we're going to do for the next week, so you know. So the review that we were going to do this week, we're going to do next week. So basically next week we're going to do a whole review of the Acts model prayer, and then we're going to focus on practical prayer applications. So next week will feel like a review, because that's what it is. And we're going to talk about just some practical ways to pray for our church, practical ways to pray for the nations, and just kind of try to sum everything we've been talking about in prayer up next week. And then the next week, we're going to start our section on evangelism. So we're going to be going through, it's probably going to take another 4 weeks, and we're going to talk about kind of when you have conversations with people at your workplace or your family or your neighbors who don't know about Christ. What are the things that the essential things that they need to know to be members. So again, we're not going like super deep theological, gold line, but we're going what is the gospel, the basic gospel, and how are some ways that we can communicate that with people in our circle of influence. So that'll take about another 4 weeks. So just kind of giving you a long-term plan, we kind of nailed it down a little bit. And then the 2 weeks after that, we're going to talk about spiritual gifts, and we are going to most likely take a spiritual gift inventory, which will be good. We got to get that, and just talk about using our gifts in the day-to-day life of the church. Is what we're going to talk about after that. And that will kind of wrap up this whole curriculum